Aloha kako and welcome to Understanding West Maui. My name is Alakai Lastimado, and today we are joined by author of ʻOhuʻohu na Mauna o ʻEʻeka, place names of Maui Komohana, Kumu Hula, Pueo pata. Aloha.
Aloha, thank you for having me.
Of course. Now, first off, can you explain Maui Komohana? Explain Maui Komohana and maybe what inspired you to take on compiling all the place names of Maui Komohana.
So we were actually at, it could be considered a party, a gathering, and Lance Collins was there, and he had this idea about something to do with West Maui. My question was, what is West Maui to him? But he said he'll leave it up to me. So Maui Komohana, when you look into the old newspapers, they include everything around what's now the West Maui Mountains or Mauna o ʻEʻeka as Maui Komohana, and everything around Haleakala as Maui Hikina or East Maui. Today, the terms are different. When we say West Maui, we often think of Ka'anapali into Lahaina. But I went with the traditional version of Maui Komohana, which is from the isthmus all the way over the moku that are on Mauna o ʻEʻeka, which is the West Maui Mountains. So that's the districts of Ka'anapali, Wailuku, and Lahaina.
And let's share a little bit about your background and maybe how it influenced your approach to the Hawaiian place names.
Sure. So from 16, I was taken into apprenticeship to become a Kumu Hula. And so I would live on and off with my masters or my teachers or my masters. And when we are in those types of situations, like I'm often their driver or the person who goes to get their things or, do things like that. But when we're driving or traveling inter-island, they're always telling stories about certain things. I was very lucky. So on my hand, I have my 7 masters here. Nona Karuhio Kalani and Diane Napua Amadeo. Auntie Diane was a kupuna from Maui, a master lay maker. She was a master in several things, but she had so many stories about where she was raised, which is in Kanaio, but also where her family comes from, which is Kauaula in Lahaina. And because of her grandfather's travels over the mountain from Kauaula into Iao and out to Wailuku, there's a lot of things that we learned about inside of what's now called Iao Valley. And so being able to hear these stories that most of them aren't written down, or maybe parts of them might be alluded to in other stories, was important. But as a hula practitioner, this teacher of mine, the 6th one, her name was Auntie Eleanor Kaupu Makida. She was a kahuna of this practice called La'aukahea. So that means she has mastery over language. And so one of the sayings that she said, and she teases us by saying it. She says, "A'ohe wahi aho e panui ki ka ho'opau wali iaku." It's so long. And so when I was learning haku mele or composition from her, she would always say that, "A'ohe wahi aho e panui ki ka ho'opau wali iaku," which means there's no virtue in wasting a single breath. So when we're composing mele, every single word that's included in a line and in a verse has to have a function. It cannot waste the breath of the person who is reciting it. And the same thing goes for the ka'au, which are the kind of like fantastical types of stories that get passed down from one generation to one generation or the next generation. Every place name is intentional. Every character's name is intentional. And so being able to access the data that's embedded in these place names especially helped to inform what I did for this particular project. Also, when it comes to things like a certain blessing ceremony that we would have to do a form of ho'oponopono Aina maybe, or ho'oponopono even, we would have to go get veke from this place called Keavakapu, and we would have to get kala from this place called Waihe'e. Like, you had to get veke from Keavakapu, you had to get kala from Waihe'e. And so when you're told these things, you don't really question it. But later, when you're in the ceremony with them and they're explaining to you, the weke is going to be used to weke, to open these problems, and kiava kapu, the place name means the kapu, little landing spot. So it's talking about that form of kapu. And then the kala fish, kala means also to release. And waihe'e, the he'e in there means to slip away. And so we are able to capitalize on the meanings of the names of the fish, as well as the name of the place, to add mana to the types of ceremonies that we did. So when we look through the mele for hula, we have to also kalailai, or pull apart the meanings of the names as well. You know the saying, ai hea oyala, where is he? Oh, ai kalalau. They're over at Kalalau. Are they really at Kalalau on Kauai? No, but because Kalalau means wandering, that we know that they're wandering, right?
All right. All right. Okay. So it is said now. It is said that if it has a Hawaiian name, it has a Hawaiian story.
Sure.
Can you maybe elaborate on that and why Inoa Aina is so central to our Hawaiian identity?
Sure. So that saying was by Auntie Diane Napua Amadeo. If it has a Hawaiian name, it has a Hawaiian story. One thing is, when you break into the old maps, some of them are solid with writing. And that tells you the kupuna were intricately familiar with each of those places to give it a specific name. When you look into the place names, they can record all types of data from people that lived there to weather phenomena that might be present there, plants, flora, fauna that might be present there, things that happened there, kupuna that lived there. And so it's important when this place name is there and we know the story behind it. Or when the place name is there and we can go to this place called Kamaile and there's maile growing everywhere. Or we go to this place called Kamaile and there's no maile growing there. Then we know that kamaile growing there would be the optimum condition of that place, right? So place names and stories, if it has a Hawaiian name, it has a Hawaiian story. We can feel good in knowing when we look at these maps, names are covering them. They're everywhere. That just shows the connection between the kupuna and the generations that they pass these names on to.
So when you were uncovering, these place names, many of them have been renamed.
I see.
Yes. So what were some of the challenges when you were doing the research to find the names? What were some of the challenges that you came across?
So just off the top of my head, there's like 3 different forms of renaming. The most obvious would be what I term superimposed name of foreign origin. And so like in the region in West Maui, which is in Wailuku-Moku, called Sprecklesville. The kupuna wouldn't call it Sprecklesville. Spreckles is not a name in Hawaiian. And so that type of renaming overlaid on like over a dozen smaller land names. And so when you take those names away by overlaying a name of you're superimposing name of foreign origin, you take access to those data that are embedded in those names. So like one talks about slippery seaweed, one talks about where kupuna landed from a certain place in Samoa, one talks about the type of fish that are in that spot. And just calling that place Sprecklesville, the people now have no connection, the data that is there, we have no availability to it. Other types of renaming are like misspellings. So like in 1954, I think, when the U.S. Board of Geographic Names took over the names in Hawaii, they were looking at maps that were handwritten and documents that were like scripts written. And people who aren't familiar with the Hawaiian language are going to see letters that aren't present, or they're not going to understand like this was actually a T, but they barely crossed it, so it looks like an L. right? So we have those types of names that get passed down to us, which, if I'm researching this name, it's up to me then to enter different forms of that name in the databases to tease out which is the more commonly used name. And then another form of name is like contracted names. So my family house is in the place called Pukalani. And this has nothing to do with West Maui, but this is an example. Pukalani, when I worked at Kamehameha schools, I asked the kids, what does it mean? There's the heavenly hall. Like, what kupuna would want a place named Heavenly Hall, right? But the contraction of it's contracted when you look in the Mahele database, it's na Pukalani, and which is the Pukalani. But then when you go further into the ka'ao and the mo'olelo regarding like kiha pi'ilani, then you see it's called na Pueo kalani, which are the sweet potato mounds of the chief of kiha, right? And so you understand then what that region was used for, right? Another misspelling is where Puamana Beach Park is now. It's now a bone preserve for Eevee, and it was misspelled as Waianukole, all these different things, and so people not familiar with how Hawaiian language works started to translate those, and then the translations were crazy, having to do with like people's bums and things like that. But when you are able to look into the primary sources, you see it's Waianu'ukole, and so water of the Nu'ukole o'opu fish. And so then you can see exactly what the fauna was there in that stream, and connectivity was important for it to be there. It's not there now. So yeah, some of the misspellings and contractions also led to name changes.
And as Hawaiians, we're very we have a strong relationship to our Aina. So once you start renaming places, especially something as simple like the West Maui Mountains, from ʻEʻeka, how does that affect our relationship with the Aina?
Okay, so you know what? I had found like dozens of maps and writings with that word ʻEʻeka in it, or variations Mauna o ʻEʻeka, kapai Mauna o ʻEʻeka, ʻEʻeka. And it wasn't until I posted it, and Cody Kapueola ākeanui on Maui messaged me and said, "Oh, Kumu, it's in Lili'uokalani's genealogy book." And so in Lili'u's genealogy books, one section mentions the mountains on the island, the mountain ranges or mountains, and it says in there, "Kapai Mauna o ʻEʻeka." So knowing that that was a name kept by the ali'i for so long, and it's in Lili'u's genealogy books, I think it makes us closer to that. But as the table, so Pu'ukukui is the highest peak, but the flat top on that is ʻEʻeka. That's what ʻEʻeka is. If I had never been to ʻEʻeka, I already know when I get up there, I'm gonna get dirty, because that's what ʻEʻeka means. And when you go up there, it's bog, and it's black mud. So when you're walking, you can sink down, 3 feet and then come up in black mud, ua ʻEʻeka. So.
Okay, so what are some ways that Native Hawaiians today can reclaim and revitalize the traditional place names?
So it's a multi-step. I wish I could say it's easy. First is my suggestion is to become familiar with the olelo Hawaii. And not just, if you graduate with a degree in olelo Hawaii and you stay there, pilikiana o, you're gonna have issues. It's in the olelo that the kupuna wrote in, where you find all of these momi, these pearls of data, these pearls of wisdom. And so to reconnect to these names, get a good foundation in the olelo Hawaii ana kupuna, and then begin to break into, to me, hands down, Papakilo database is such a godsend. Kalehanes folks with ʻOhuʻohu do a great job in that. Just typing in those names, and then don't be discouraged if you don't find a name. So something that we learn is like the name Kahului. It has 2 words in it, Kahului. And if there are names that have that ka or ke or na, sometimes they're not present in the other names, right? So you have to kind of get your system down on how to, what are you going to take out, what are you going to add perhaps in there, and then you'll find different variations of those names. But get a good foundation in olelo, and then start typing things in papakilo. Yeah.
All right. And previously, you talked about there are multiple spellings or pronunciations of a name. How do you decide which one to go ahead and use?
So only because I have experience in contractions. So like waiohuli or keokea. O is a contraction of one. And so only because I know those types of things, and there's several other ways that contractions can take place. When I look at the name source that I have, I'm also thinking, okay, what does it mean literally? Are there perhaps contractions in here? So with whatever I know, what is my best guess for this particular name? Some of them I can't find. Like if I was to translate, what does Hawaii mean? Right? What does Kauai mean? Like some of them don't have that type of easy translation. But yeah, it's based on my experience with Olelo Hawaii, what I've known about that particular place. When I was making the book, it was during the pandemic time, and so there was zero traffic. And so me and Keone would get in the car and we'd drive to these places to see, does this match this? And so through those types of things, it's all these ways to triangulate to come up with a specific name. But even that, I don't assert that this is the meaning of it. What I would suggest is that the specialists in that particular moku or ahupua'a be consulted along with people who are specialists in place names and in Olelo Hawaii to come to a consensus for that type of place. So right now there's signs on Maui with the different ahupua'a and moku names, and they chose to spell it the kalana of waiehu as waiehu. And so, which is completely fine. I wrote it as waiehu without the okina, but in my current book right now, which is listening to kupuna of Maui's language preferences, 100% of them say waiehu, like that. So that would be up to that kalana to make that choice to say, this is how we actually pronounce it. Don't get me started on la haina, like that.
And so you just mentioned kupuna.
Yeah.
What role do kupuna, and especially maybe oral traditions, what role do they play in preserving the place, especially the pronunciation or of a name?
So when I first started working at Punana Leo, like right after I graduated high school, I already had kind of a good command of language because of my auntie guys. And so I went straight to work at Punana Leo, but the AHAC didn't pay my full salary, so I got this grant through Alulike. And so on Tuesdays and Thursdays, instead of doing lunch at Punana, I would go to Alulike and sing for the kupuna. And these are kupuna, like these are like hardcore kupuna, right? So, I become part of, like they're attaché, like they're traveling bard with them all the time. So I'm hearing them talk about all of these stories and stuff like that. So that definitely plays a part in how I understand these place names to be like, people say paunau, but I heard pauna'u. Those types of things. And then now through like Kani Aina, which is on Ulukau, you have access to all of these kupuna talking about where they're from. And especially for East Maui, there's a whole segment on East Maui place names where Larry Kimura folks are asking, have you heard this name? And then they correct it. Listening to like Henry Meheula from Lahaina or Hattie Akuk from Lahaina, that's how I know. It's not La Haina or La Haina. They only said Lahaina. Yeah, the old spellings in the maps include Raheina. EI, because when we talk quickly, the AI shrinks to an EI. So Hayao becomes Heyo, No Laila becomes No Leila. And so if you have a long vowel here, La, and a long vowel at the end, you would not shorten those middle vowels. It would not be La Hina, it'd be Lahina. So anyhow, there's all these ways, but the kupuna, the kolakowaha, that's the one that are the most informative.
Now, certain words in Hawaiian, they can carry a very deep spiritual and cultural meaning. Can you maybe share an example of a place name that reveals more than just the name?
Sure. So, I mean, just thinking off the top of my head so we have ceremonies in Lahaina for Hula.
Okay.
I'll talk about what we did after the fires. 4 halau came together. And so when groups come together to do one ceremony, we get split into what are called kihapai, which are segments. Each of us conduct our kuleana for that one ceremony. And so my halau, because we're not the fattest, we were the ones picked to walk up to the hill with the L, Pa'u.
Okay.
And then Auntie Hoku folks were at Wahikuli. Kapueola folks were at Hauola. And then Alaka mele folks were at Moku'ula. So Moku'ula, as the capital and spiritual center of Lahaina, they had their kulana was the ho'omau, which is to anchor the pule that were being done simultaneously in these 4 different areas of Lahaina. Kapueola folks, because Hauola is a healing stone, and ola means life and healing, they did the healing prayers focused to Moku'ula so that, emau iana marira, so it could be anchored there. We were at Pa'u, which means hard work. And it's also the mauka, so that everything can flow downwards in the mauka to makai flow. So our prayer segment was based on that, all focused down there. But Auntie Hoku was at Wahikuli, which means noisy place. And their kulana was to amplify the prayers, make it noisy throughout the district, so that it infiltrated the entirety of that section we were praying over like that. So we capitalize on those. And if we want to cleanse in the ocean, there's lots of place names we can cleanse, but the name of the channel is ʻOhuʻohu, which means to bathe. So it's a perfect place for that type of activity.
Yeah, let's go ahead and talk about natural features and how it can shape the names, of names or stories of the places.
I mentioned this Auntie Diane, her papa, Peter Kanawaliwali, was from Kaua'ula Valley. And so it's often translated as Kaua'ula, the red rain. So if I'm going to tell you Kaua'ula, I don't need to put a K, like Kaua'ula in front of it. That's the. And so I always thought about that, like why is it Pio ole ke Kaua'ula? In Helohalo o Honolulu. And so I said to myself, why don't you hyphenate the name in a way that you think it might work? So I looked up hyphenated Kau -a-ula. And I found 2 instances in the newspaper where it's split up like that, Kaua'ula, which means the rising of the red dust particulate. So that's what that means. So when I then began to look at the stories of Kaua'ula, the wind, it talks about it would make it a red haze between Lahaina, Lanai, and Kaho'olawe. You couldn't see those islands. It was a red haze. So how can that inform what we do today? So that red particulate is the dirt in that particular valley coming up. It's red. It's coming down those hills below. All of it's red dirt. So if the kupuna knew that this red particulate can rise into the air, do you think they would have made the decision to spray chemicals on that dirt? I don't think they would have. Knowing that dirt, when that wind blows, is going to become particulate, and they're going to have to be sweeping that off of all their shelves, off all their clothes, and now they're coated in chemicals. So what happened when the sugarcane plantations came in, that type of the chemical fertilizers, pesticides, insecticides, even the plastic particulate that from the plastic kind of biodegrading in there, is now becoming windborne when this wind blows, and everybody's breathing it in, it's coating everything. So things like that. So in that one name, knowing that that's the name of the wind of that place and that has that potential, it's a regular kind of thing. I think that can help us moving forward in what takes place on the lands, what we should be allowing to take place on lands like that, knowing that the name is airborne red particulate, right? So that's kind of how they're valuable in that type of situation.
Oh, hollow. No. Now, ready, Maui Komohana, is there a specific place that's significant to you personally?
Oh gosh, yeah. So Kauaʻula is a place where I've spent a good amount of time. It's also, there's a lot of stories in there from Auntie Diane, and then now my ko-kumuhula, her husband's family, the Palakikos, have kuleana land there. So a lot of our ceremonies are take place in there for Hula. We do kuahu, and yeah, it's a very powerful place. But there's a lot of stories, individual stories that I was told. So when we know these stories, we're aware of it. We're borrowing, capitalizing on the mana of those things to bolster the mana of our ceremonies as well. So that's a beautiful spot. But I mean, if we're just gonna talk like Lahaina Cannery Mall, like how many shows did I do there as a dancer, as a musician, and that whole knowing what used to be like the Alamihi fish pond and things like that. It's a lot. It's there's not one that really is my favorite spot, but they're all important. They're all important to me.
And what do you hope that this book contributes to the broader movement of the Hawaiian culture and language revitalization?
So I do some work with writing cultural impact assessments. And so like when developments take place or land has to be moved a little bit, cultural impact assessments take place. And so already I know it's been used to inform some of the newer ones. It's informed some of the ones I've worked on. But I want it to be an asset that can be used to help us, one, connects to what used to be there, to help us know what the optimum environmental health there would look like, and to inform development and projects moving forward. That's what I want for that book.
So now, do you see like teachers, Hawaiian language teachers, community leaders in this book?
Yeah.
In what way?
Well, they'll cite it. Yeah, they're citing it, and so something that I have access to, which is the PDF version of the book, and so it's on my phone, and so I always get these calls from community members. Kumu, what is the name of this place over here? And then I can look it up and send that information to them. That's how I use the book. But for language, for Maui language, it's also important because place names are named after the language preferences of that place. So I mentioned to you like Waianu'ukole, and there's also, so Waianu'ukole is right over here. It even says it on this map, but there's another Nu'ukole right here in Ma'alaya. And so when you look up Nu'ukole, it's the name of the ʻOhuʻohu fish that's also called alamo'o and also called hi'u'ula. So knowing that there's these place names called Nu'ukole on this part of the land, what can we infer the kupuna would use on this land? Nu'ukole. However, listening to the recordings for East Maui, Keolahu'eu was asked, what are the types of ʻōʻopu you folks have? And he says, hi'u'ula. And so you now have West Maui preference for nu'ukole, East Maui preference for hi'ukole. The East Maui people will say the word laulima for cooperation, but there's a place name in Ka'anapali named Limalau, which is exactly the same thing. And so what do you think the preference would be? In the dictionary, it says o'a is the Maui word for the kawila plant. But on West Maui, there are so many kawila names. But on East Maui, there's no kawila names. It's only o'a. So we now begin to see just through the place names, we have o'a for East Maui and Kawila for West Maui. And so for Hawaiian language teachers who want to insert more Maui language preference into their schools, there's a section in the book that talks about some of the language preferences as evidenced through place names.
So now let's talk about the future, the keiki.
Yeah.
What can they do? What advice would you give to them in preserving Inoa Aina?
Learn the language. Learn the language to where you have no problem reading the newspapers, because when you break into the Mahele database, it's in that type of language. Yeah, learn those things. And one thing that Auntie Eleanor would say to us, ina hiki ke kanaka ho'okahi, he hiki kanaka no ia. If one person can do it, then it's simply a human ability. So anybody has the ability to do these things as long as they have a drive to it. For the teachers who see that children might have a proclivity to place names or learning these types of things, they need to be nurturing them so that they will be the next ones to do this type of work. Because not everybody's interested. Not all Hawaiian language speakers are interested in this type of work, but I am. I'm a nerd for this kind of stuff. So cultivate those children who want to do that. But first, learn Hawaiian language first, yeah.
Well, Kumu, mahalo for your mana'o, your ike, your aloha. No, mahalo for being here.
Thank you, my pleasure. Mahalo.
Aloha, ahuiho, malama pono.
Me kanani ku kila kila. O lahaina lo